The heavy wooden doors swing open slowly on ancient, rusted hinges, and you apprehensively step inside the darkened halls of the grim edifice. Inside, you find the air thick with dust and particles of swirling matter, and your eyes adjust slowly to the darkness. There is more. A strange feeling as if something is stirring in anticipation at your arrival. Drina's voice interrupts your train of thought. This place is alien to me. There is nothing here that marks this as an imperial place of worship. We must be on our guard. Embla points ahead. Look, Luma rods. They must have been set up by the Cabal expedition. Perhaps we can find some clues as to what fate befell them. I'll tell you what befell them, Roland growls. Nothing good is what. Let's move out, people. On your guard. Wriggling fungi blobs. Floating statue bobbers, but only on some statues. Magic light source? Bunk room. Infirmary? Oh. And mess hall, infested with newborns. Well, that's not at all disturbing. Hideous, blobby baby monsters. I mean, I'd pretend to be horrified, but that's a pretty stereotypical body horror classic. Honestly, mutated adults are generally more daunting. I'm pretty sure I can take most babies in a fight. Like, 78% sure. They are pretty tanky, though. A taste of things to come, no doubt. I mean, I suppose that is really the intent here. If these things are the newborns, then you have to wonder what they might actually grow into. Yeah, we're fine. Aside from being moderately tanky, these things don't really pose much of a threat. Ooh, that's creepy. Huh. Highlighted carving, but we can't seem to interact with it. I mean, we did interact with it, but nothing happened. aside from it being marked as interacted with. Perhaps a switch or secret door? Let's check the right. Deliberately avoiding the center hall until we've filled in the edges. Here we go. Scribbled in a shaky hand on ancient parchment is the following verse. Walk the path in humble fate, contemplate the hidden gate. Let the watchers show the way, like time flows round the wheel of day, to heed the silent sleeper's call, and enter into the dreaming hall. Right. So we do indeed have a secret door. That does make sense. Sounds like we have to perhaps arrange something in a clockwise fashion. Ooh, free spellbooks. Bit late in the game, but we'll take them. Though, sadly, at this point, I don't really see us unlocking much more in the way of spell tiers. Also, we are getting a fair few duplicates here. As you pass through the ancient library, you cannot help but be awestruck by the number and age of the assembled volumes. Surely there are texts here that exist nowhere else in the Empire. It's a melancholy thought. This Priory is a time capsule to an age that is long past, and you cannot help but linger for a moment on all that has been lost over the long centuries of steady decline. You draw out a random volume and examine it, on the reticular properties of salts. As you turn the beautifully bound volume over in your hands, you stop. Did you just see something move? In the shadows. You squint into the darkness and see only rows and rows of books. Then you see it again. It's as if reality itself ripples. To your horror, you realize that you are surrounded by a pack of some kind of chameleonic horrors. Make ready. Stalkers, alright. Very Stranger Things. Not, I suppose, that Stranger Things really pioneered the idea of flower or tentacle-headed monstrosities. Even just looking back to the 80s, you've got your classic Mind Flayers, you've got your Cthulhu, you've got your Man-Thing from Marvel Comics. Perhaps not as well known as the Swamp Thing, but he still gets around. I suppose you could actually argue that the main monster from Stranger Things is actually inspired by the classic Hounds of Tindalos, what with the whole interworld travel and all, especially with the Season 2 quadrupedal design, though I suppose they obviously don't really play up the whole coming through angles thing. Or time travel. Did they? No, they didn't have any time travel in Stranger Things. Though I certainly wouldn't put it past them. Maybe more of a dimensional shambler. There are some matching motifs there. Gray skin, travel between worlds. An initially humanoid design. Yeah, it's funny because they call it the Demogorgon. But for anyone who's actually played classic D&D, it looked nothing like the actual Demogorgon, which just looks completely bonkers. The actual Demogorgon is like a two-headed monkey monster with tentacles for arms. They use D&D terminology for a lot of the monsters in Stranger Things, but I think that's more just because that's how the kids, I suppose, would frame them or quantify them based on their own knowledge of 80s fantasy. Whereas the creatures themselves are generally much more obviously inspired by Lovecraftian mythos. Though obviously I do feel like Stranger Things also draws inspiration from other sources as well. It's just sort of a melting pot of 80s era horror, which I do appreciate. And we're good. Honestly, kind of surprised they didn't try turning invisible. That would have made them not necessarily more of a challenge, but at least more distinct from all the other meat monsters we fought. A book lies open on the librarian's desk. Brother Aaron has once again made off with the key to the forbidden section, claiming it is much more convenient for both me and him that he keeps it for the duration of his studies. He's assured me it's well hidden in his study in the Eastern Tower whilst not in use. Bloody fool. I'll need to send lay brother Theo to recover it next time Aaron is sleeping. Ah, forbidden book section, another Lovecraftian classic. And of course, that must be the key we picked up on our way in. Yep. Alright, what have we got? Whole lot of nothing. How about you? Oh, just... okay. More spell books, albeit tier 4. Honestly, kind of disappointing. I was really hoping we'd find something a bit more colorful. You know, actual forbidden lore. But that's fine. I'm sure there's other horrors to encounter. Crates of supplies, camp equipment, and mining gear litter this room. It appears you found the Cabal Expedition's base camp. I wonder what happened to them all, Kat muses. And what they left behind. She absent-mindedly kicks an empty sack. Look here, the floor. Drina walks into the chamber, kicking away dust from the intricate mosaic that is laid out before you. The imagery. There's something wrong with it. Shh, Embla interrupts. Did you hear something? Out of the shadows, grotesque forms lumber towards you. These are not the desiccated forms of the ancient dead, but fresh corpses swollen with squirming tentacles of the fungi from outside. I'd wager we found the expedition's members, Roland snarls as he braces to receive the onslaught. Weapons, people. To the last. Vessels and evolved. Interesting. I will say, I'm a bit unclear on exactly how this fungus works, because early on it seemed more like a... Well, I mean, I guess I suppose there is some basic folly in trying to attribute consistent rules to an inherently otherworldly entity. Oh wow, look at that. They're actually vulnerable to crits. Thank goodness for that. But yeah, like early on, you know, with the well encounter all the way back on Idra, it seemed like more of an invasion of the body snatchers sort of thing. we found the remains of those unfortunate children in the well, separate from the monsters that it created to replace them. But then that general concept did get a bit fuzzier when we actually investigated the crypt below Harren, because there it did sort of waffle back and forth between the idea that it was actually reanimating the corpses themselves, and then here, of course, we see people who just seem to be straight up infested and mutated. Though, of course, ultimately, at the end of the day, it is an inherently unknowable eldritch abomination from beyond. Though we do at least now have a name for it. The fungi from outside. Also, I suppose we have learned that there really is only one main eldritch deity. The dragon itself. All of these other assorted horrors that we've encountered are simply heralds of its approach. You know what I would really like to find is perhaps some reports or lore books left behind by the Cabal. That is really kind of what I'm lacking here, is some nice narrative framework for the things that we're encountering, even if it is being presented by inherently unreliable narrators. My dungeon master brain is just spinning and flailing wildly, trying to grasp at any fragments we can find and link them all together into some vaguely cohesive whole. Always a perilous pursuit in any eldritch anthology. I wonder what the tree motif is about. The mosaic we noted on the way in. It does seem to be like a leafless tree surrounded by otherworldly creatures. We also saw what looked to be similar illustrations in the bunk rooms we passed. The bunk room and infirmary both. Though perhaps that's all a reference to the fungi from beyond? Or fungi from outside, rather. Though I suppose that's another big question, right? Like, the implication, at least from Embla, is that whatever's under the Priory is drawing the dragon. And the fungi is a herald of the dragon, so in theory, that wouldn't be something this temple was built around. It would be something that was drawn here ahead of the dragon. So logically, the tree should theoretically be something else. And we have seen a bit of a recurring tree motif, albeit only very loosely. The giant oak near Mother Katok's cabin. The one at the center of Fergal. Though I suppose not much else. I mean, that is just two trees, not exactly a solid framework to build a theory around. Yeah, we just gotta kill these guys and poke around for more clues. I'm spinning my wheels here. But not really getting anywhere as far as speculation goes. Oh, hey, look at that. Vulnerable to Sublime. Wish I'd known that sooner. Alright, that should definitely help speed things up a bit. In fact, I think we already know how this fight's ending. Let's skip ahead a bit, shall we? It is done. With the last of our foes felled, we are free to continue our futile hunt for answers. Oh, finally, thank you. Cabal Journal 1. A journal that appears to have been written by one of the members of the Cabal expedition. This one was found in the base camp. Entry 1. We finally arrived at the Priory and found it in shockingly good condition. It's as if time has stood still here. The initial survey does not reveal a clear means of accessing the lower level, but I'm confident we'll find a way, given enough time. Entry 2. This place boggles the mind. It appears to stand as it was left millennia ago. How it could have slipped so well out of time and history is truly a mystery to me, as is the fate of the Priory's original occupants. Entry 3. Still no success in finding the door to the catacombs. I can only conclude it's somehow concealed. We did, however, make an interesting discovery. The 4 statues on the Pilgrim's Road can be rotated. I'm certain this is somehow significant. Entry 4. Some form of disease is spreading amongst the men. Abdominal pain and swelling combined with fevers. Our apothecary is so far at a loss at curing it, but suggests that proximity to the fungal growths that started sprouting is a potential vector of infection. I've ordered that masks be worn near the growths. Entry 5. A breakthrough. We found a document in the scriptorium with a verse on it. It's so clear now. The portal had been hidden in plain sight all along. All it took to open it was the correct configuration of the statues. The dreaming halls await. Soon we shall no doubt get everything we deserve. I'm sure it will be quite nice and everything we had hoped for. Indeed. As for the statues, that's fairly obvious. 4 rotating statues apparently arrayed on... Ooh, hello. Carving we can't interact with. Right, so we have 4 statues and more newborns, both of which are fairly easily handled. We obviously just have to turn the statues in a clockwise configuration. Not sure what's up with the carvings, though. One might have been a secret door, but at this point we've seen 3, each with an individual, unique image. But perhaps it'll make more sense as we delve deeper. There we go. Ah, and our 4th statue is blocked off by rubble. Gotcha. But we can see where it should be based on the tile configuration. Let's get eyes on before we start fussing with facing. Given the other things they've thrown at us thus far, you never know when extra twists might be involved. Okay, well, I mean, that. The relief of this altarpiece seems to shift and squirm in the dancing light. What's more, there appears to be a hidden passage behind it. No way of opening it can be seen nearby. Tree motif. But the central entity has a giant eyeball, so probably not a tree. I suppose it's possible that this primordial emperor, or just the emperors that founded the empire in general, were themselves inherently inhuman. That would certainly explain the need for masks, and why their bodies need be hidden away from prying eyes. Perhaps the original emperors were themselves early heralds of the dragon, establishing an empire simply to essentially seed a feast for their master. Or perhaps they were attempting to simply strike out on their own, and the dragon has now come to finally punish them or gather them back into the fold. Right, let me just double check that verse real quick. Walk the path in humble faith, contemplate the hidden gate. Let the watchers show the way like the time flows round the wheel of day. No, that seems about as straightforward as it gets. It's barely even a riddle. I am almost tempted to put them in reverse order, just to see what happens, but I suspect that would just open the other effigies and unleash more monsters upon us. That does feel like a fairly predictable outcome. We'll just do it the way that's clearly intended. I wonder what the Watchers are supposed to be. There were similar statues at the foot of the staircase, perhaps representing the monks. Though I suppose you could also say it has a general resemblance to the King in Yellow, another one of the supposed heralds of the dragon, as encountered back in Fergal. The ground trembles as the sound of shifting stone reverberates throughout the complex. Something large has moved. Or perhaps opened? Gosh, I wonder what it could be. Okay, well, it definitely wasn't that. So yeah, I think we just cracked open the dream vault. Yep. One sec, let me just top off real quick, then we'll give it a gander. Oh, and look at that. I suppose that is a nod in favor of the Emperor potentially being fungal in nature. The octagonal room has 4 throne-like machines arranged around a central aperture. Thick, squirming tentacles spew forth from the shaft, and you can't help but wonder where it terminates. A strange humming can be felt rather than heard, coming from the center of the room. Intricately wrought in a complex design that appears more like machinery than decoration, each throne has an indentation that would accommodate a human figure. Leaning in, Embla examines the indentation further and notices inlays of pure silver radiating out from where the user's skull would be. You follow the inlays and find that they seem to converge towards the room's central shaft. If you were to guess, you'd say that this machinery somehow attunes and connects the user to reticular vibrations emanating from the shaft. As to what is generating those vibrations. Embla, do you think this thing connects to our dead Emperor? Yes, I think the monks came down here to commune with him, using those machines. Dreaming his dreams. You walk over to the shaft and peer down it. There is no end in sight. Whatever lies at the bottom lies far below this level of the catacombs. Very weird science. You have mastered all that you have set your mind to, yet the sweetness of your victory is tainted by the knowledge that once you have reached the top, there is nowhere else to go but down. Yeah, that sounds about right. And again, doesn't super matter what we take at this point, I think. We're really just kind of filling things out. As for the chamber here, 4 machines seemingly linked to the corpse of a dead emperor, a possibly inhuman emperor, with lines of sylver, or possibly deliberately connected via this mysterious fungal growth, the fungus from outside. Could the fungus itself perhaps be like a biocomputer? Run amok, perhaps, trying to self-replicate and repair? We have seen other general signs of science fiction technology amongst the old Empire's artifacts. A large, pulsating sac grows from the side of the fungal infection. There is something inside it. To your disgust and horror, a rotting corpse riddled with fungi spills forth. As it does, it drops a small journal. You pocket the book and move on. Cabal Journal 2. Found on a cocooned corpse in the catacombs. Entry 1. We entered the Dreaming Hall today. I'm awestruck by the mystery of it all. What secrets did the sleeper whisper to the monks as they dreamed? We must push on, and soon enough we too shall stand before this timeless glory. Entry 2. By the maidens, we found it! The tomb in all its glory! We lost 2 members to traps trying to enter the room, but it's only a matter of time now. Entry 3. This is a disaster. How can this be? I know there is something here, calling for us. There must be some other way. Several pages are ruined from the fungal infection. Entry 9. To move in and out of the caves and continue excavating the Eternity Gate. My greatest concern at this point is the rate at which we are losing crew to suicides and infection. More pages ruined by fungal infection. Entry 14. I saw them change before my very eyes. Oh, blessed maidens, I may have escaped for now, but I cannot escape the images that now haunt me. What's worse, the entire complex is somehow resealing itself, and I'm trapped between the false tomb and the surface level. I can only pray someone is left alive topside to open the gate. Yeah, well, bad news on that count, but, I guess you already realized that. Interesting. Kind of bummed he died so early. Would have liked to continue finding more journals as we got further and further into the complex. Oh, right, I guess we are in a crypt. It says it right up top. Priory Crypt. Weird. I was actually starting to speculate this place, this entire structure, might be like a weird science eldritch ship. I suppose it still could be. What if instead of a crypt, that's actually... As you enter the hall, a mass of misshapen flesh and slavering jaws spill forth from the shadows and darkened side passages. You can't help but think that the glistening and slimy horrors before you look as if they were birthed into existence recently. No doubt they are now ravenously hungry. Ooh, flying polyps, another Lovecraftian classic. Plus, flesh striders? Flower-headed quadrupeds, that does seem to be another potential nod to Stranger Things, though again, Stranger Things certainly did not pioneer the concept. But man, flying polyps, see, yeah, that does kind of play into what I was already starting to speculate on. But that's the biggest trick with this game, is trying to now differentiate between what is intended to just be a nod or an Easter egg referencing back towards Lovecraftian lore versus what the actual story of this game might be. Because flying polyps in Lovecraft obviously have their own storied history. They're an extra-dimensional race of other dimensional creatures that once ruled the Earth, but came in conflict with other ancient races that also occupied Earth, and were eventually sealed away underground. Which does, have some pretty obvious parallels to what we're doing here, what we're discovering, but at the same time, it could also just be a Lovecraftian Easter egg, an element of Lovecraftian lore they're absorbing into their own unique story. The descriptive text said that these things seem to be new. The implication being either that they're newly arrived invaders, spawned by the approach of the dragon. But what if they're actually elements of an in-structure security system, an organic security system? What if the crypts are actually like a biomass storage facility? We kind of got a glimpse of that with Calipero, who was, routinely cloning himself and then essentially, I guess not quite recycling his clones. He was destroying them as they started to fail. But the general theme there, the idea that he was creating an infinite array of expendable, magically attuned assistants, could be a theme that we're also seeing playing out here as well. Something that may be just a recurring theme with the Empire in general, given the now established fact that only those who are particularly attuned to the reticulum, and maybe potentially inhuman in nature, are allowed to even rule the Empire in the first place. Not to mention their private guards and assistants or whatnot. I forget what they're called now. But their honor guard, the ones who secret away their bodies and guard them after death, are also masked and thus potentially also inhuman in nature. Perhaps those are also expendable, magically attuned clones, akin to the ones created by Calipero. I don't know if the fungus ties directly into that, because it's also implied to be something separate. Something sent by the dragon, which is being drawn by the presence of the emperors. But we have observed the fungus doing things similar to that potential cloning in absorbing the children in the well, or the corpses beneath Haran, and then spitting out imperfect clones, albeit ones of more inscrutable purpose. Perhaps more deliberately designed for battle, much as these things are. The machines we saw at the top of the shaft could be some way to pass on not just dreams, but memories of how to operate all this technology. Either transferred via sylver or via the fungus from outside. if we do stick with the idea, the theory that it is some sort of bioorganic nanite-like substance, perhaps. Organic circuits, organic machinery. I don't know, there's just so many different ways it could end up going. But I do think the general idea here is that the early emperors were something utterly inhuman. And the monks were either their assistants seeking to carry on their agendas or humans trying to harness those inhuman technologies, which ultimately led to the rise of the now failing empire. Which I suppose does beg the question of why is the empire failing? There are still emperors, but we know very little about them. The bulk of the game, minus the prologue, has all taken place in this one isolated Outer Isles region. So everything we've heard about the actual main empire itself has been kind of secondhand in small bits and bobs. I am intrigued. I'm just, again, spinning my wheels, trying to make sense of it all. And I would definitely go insane and die in an actual eldritch horror scenario. I just would not be able to resist trying to make sense of what's going on. Even now, I can practically feel my sanity slowly draining away, 1 point at a time. I do feel like we're onto something, though. The idea that the fungus is more a technology than its own individually aware entity. Hold on, let me just kill this last one, then we'll delve ever deeper. I'm trying to think of where, like, the whole time loop element fits in, though. We do see occasional themes of looping time, which could be as simple as just explaining the entities, both the Emperor and or the Dragon, aren't bound by conventional three-dimensional linear passage of time. There have also been general implications that the Emperor isn't so much dead as he is sleeping. You know, the references to the monks using those machines to share his dreams. That could go in a lot of directions. Organic backup. This whole reality is not but a dream of a greater entity, given life of its own, but now coming to an end as that entity awakens. The sarcophagus has the following description. Kareleth the Many-Faced, first Grandmaster of the Order of the Crystal Eye. Figure on the sarcophagus is a conventional robed watcher, but the entity in the carving is the lanky, long-haired creature visible in several of the other images. The sarcophagus has the following description. Calamar the Wise, 3rd Grandmaster of the Order of the Crystal Eye. No carving on this one, so maybe I am overthinking that aspect. Though we do have a name for the Order of, I guess, monks? The Order of the Crystal Eye. With Karoleth being the first and Calamar being the third. Rothrax the Grey, 2nd Grandmaster of the Order of the Crystal Eye. So Karoleth, Rothrax, Calamar, Many-Faced Wise, no, Many-Faced Grey Wise. Karoleth, Rothrax, Calamar. Crystal Eye. Do we have a 4th here? We have 4 beds up top, positioned around the shaft. Oh, hello there. Cabal Journal 3. A surprise to be sure, but not an unwelcome one. Thought we'd seen the last of these after we found the corpse of our unfortunate academic. Entry 1. They found the secret passage to some kind of cave below the false tomb. Something far older than the Priory itself. Older than the Empire, even, is the talk around camp. I just wish my insides didn't hurt as much. Entry 2. They're sending me down with the next shipment of tools. That means passing through the night maze. They say it can't be lit, even by magical lighting. I hate the dark. Apparently it's easy enough to navigate if you know how. South until you hit the first wall, and then west until wall. North until wall, west until wall, north until wall. West until wall, then north and you're there. Southwest, northwest, north, west, north. Okay. Entry 3. I went all the way to the sanctum this time. By the golden, how I wish I had not. How can such a thing be? The writing becomes rushed. Hear screams below. Something is wrong. Save us! Okay, so really just kind of directions through this night maze, no real other clues as to what's going on here. Though it does remind me that the gods of this realm, or maybe the original emperors, are referred to as the Golden. We've generally heard silver with a Y is like the conductive material for reticular magic, so I don't think we've really seen much in the way of actual gold adornments on much of anything, not even on like the statue of the Emperor, aside perhaps from Calipero's fake sarcophagus. Ink and paper that appears to have been abandoned mid-use. It seems someone was copying the mosaic on the floor. Oh gosh, yeah, okay, well that just straight up looks like a map key. Wait. Okay, yeah, that's got to be the night maze, assuming we're starting on the east and headed north and west. Forces pull at you, driving you inexorably forwards. You are no doubt, nearing something. What's wrong? Why do we stop? Embla asks impatiently. There's something wrong. Do you feel that? A feeling we're being watched, snarls Roland as he turns to face the amorphous eye things that glide silently down from the ceiling to prey upon you. And we've got more flying polyps, okay? Which I am starting to suspect are like an organic security system, perhaps inadvertently triggered by the Cabal. A recurring theme in a lot of Lovecraftian lore is the element of otherworldly entities with technology that's so advanced it borders on the supernatural. So perhaps what we are seeing here is an expedition to bury your peak sort of situation, or like the Technic League of Numeria in Pathfinder, an incredibly advanced alien ship that crash landed on an otherwise primitive world and then was discovered and harvested for its secrets by the local race, in this case early humans, who then built their entire empire around it, but jealously guarded their secrets so that only the elite few, the attuned, the emperors, would ever know the true reality of it so that they could retain power whilst keeping everyone else under their thumbs. Only for the Cabal, which is made up of moneylenders and other general non-attuned gentry, to try to do kind of an end run around that, only to ultimately end up blundering into one of those early alien ships themselves, but without the expertise to know how to safely handle it, thus unleashing its now unguided technologies on the outer isles around it. Or perhaps it's just fulfilling a function that long lay dormant. Could be your classic terraforming ship akin to like the Phoenix Point scenario. Or it could just be trying to repair itself. If we do assume their technology is bioorganic in nature, it might just view the local populace as a resource to be harvested and repurposed to either restore its systems or to possibly even restore its somehow not dead pilot. I mean, we're assuming the pilot... Oh, you know what? One thing we did see in a lot of those carvings on the way down here, aside from the general tree motif, was a lanky humanoid figure with incredibly long hair that obscured its features. What if the hair is actually the root of all these fungal growths, which are often implied to stem from strands which themselves can be as thin as hairs, tracing back down through cracks into the depths of the earth? Perhaps the carvings represent the entity that is essentially, literally, the root of all of this fungus, our potential pilot or sleeper or primordial, original, early emperor. Maybe even a former human themselves. One of the first who attempted to harness the technologies of this strange craft? Question mark? I mean, that of course is assuming that all of this does in fact go back to the whole science fantasy crashed spaceship scenario, which I feel like it really is leaning into, given some of the other things we've seen on the way here. The cloning pods, the technology beneath the lighthouse, the reticular observatory, the general implication that even basic astronomy gear, like the telescope we found back on the beach, stem from that same reticular technology. Which would make sense if it all stemmed from an interstellar craft. In fact, if we do go that route, we could even potentially assume that the dragon approaching our world is itself perhaps from the same species or a rival species, drawn by a distress signal that long lay dormant but was inadvertently activated by the Cabal. Though again, no real links to our time loop element. Though, I mean, there are other ways you could explain that. Might not be three-dimensional space travel, but rather fourth-dimensional travel outside linear time. Or perhaps just the inherent nature of the like, attunement radiation. You know, if we do assume they travel outside of linear time, perhaps the dragon, the entity coming to investigate whatever's buried beneath the Priory, is in fact the same thing that is buried beneath the Priory. Perhaps it's being drawn to investigate whatever crashed here without realizing that what crashed here is itself from a different point in non-linear time, only to ultimately itself end up crashing here, thus closing the loop and creating a perpetual cycle. Oh man, I don't know. There's just... I am very intrigued, though. I mean, the fact that I'm spinning my wheel so hard, definitely a good sign that I'm really caught up in whatever's going on and trying to puzzle it all out. I do love a good mystery, even if it's one not meant for mortal minds to fathom. That said, this does feel like a good place to call it. I feel compelled to transcribe the map we just stumbled across. I mean, we do have directions, but I am curious about some of the other things that we saw on the map. Odd markers at the ends of some of the halls. Let me just fill out these level ups real quick. Again, kind of a moot point, but might as well. Who knows what we might yet encounter beyond this maze. That said, we'll hit the pause button for now. I will carefully transcribe this map, thankfully laid out in a grid format. And we will pick up here next time as we hopefully start finding some real answers. I do enjoy speculation, but at some point I do desire the gratification of knowing just how close or far off I ultimately was. Also, I suppose it would be nice to know if we actually survived this scenario, but I think we can probably guess. See you then. Oh, and special thanks to the Raiders, the fine folks who help make these videos possible, including but not limited to Eerie V23, Revenant, Alois, Dragon Matrix 7, Drakiith, EgonAlter, Exsellsior, Gottlieb, James Trimmier, Kazorm, Lady Shayna, Mark Giemza, Nathan Welch Jr., OverlordPherom, RandomPassrby, RobbyB, Tomasz Piątkowski, Triphoppenskip, and Valinrook. Thanks for your support, guys. That said, if you'd also like to help support the channel, then feel free to push the buttons that do the things. Trust me, it does make a difference. Or you could even check out the PayPal, the Patreon, the Nexus GG, or the YouTube memberships. Links are in the description.